Hi everyone, welcome to Music Wise. My name is Donato Cabrera. I'm the music director of the California Symphony and the Las Vegas Philharmonic. And with me today, we have two emerging composers who are and will become affiliated with both orchestras in one way or another. And I'm so excited to talk about music from now, music today, with two folks who are just wonderful, wonderfully engaging musicians, composers. So please help me welcome via wherever you are in the world, Juan Pablo Contreras. Hi, Juan Pablo.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Donato. Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here with you and to chat about music, new music, and all of these amazing topics.
Same. And Viet Cuong.
Hi, thanks for having me as well.
So, okay, Juan Pablo, you're joining us from Los Angeles. Yeah?
Los Angeles, correct.
And Viet Cuong, where are you joining us?
Near Atlanta, Georgia.
Fantastic. So we have representation from around the country, as it were. And I'm so curious. What projects have you both found yourselves working on during these last couple of months? I've often read these recently from various composers that, it's this time alone has given me so much, extra time to practice or, learn a new language or study scores. And frankly, for me, I found all of these things very difficult to do for quite a while because, my mind was occupied with the future. And it's may not be the most opportunistic time to do extra projects. How about you? How have you felt?
Well, for me, I felt similar to you, Donato. I felt like personally, I felt the necessity to connect with people like even more. So one thing that I did, rather than just keep on composing, I was lucky enough that I finished the big commission for the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra like a week before all of this happened. So I had a big piece turned in, so I didn't have any new projects on the deck. So what I did is I started teaching orchestration online, and I found a huge community in Latin America, especially, that wanted to learn orchestration. So I did like 2 big orchestration courses and had like 50 students in each course. So it was a wonderful way to just kind of connect with people who are interested in the orchestra and writing for this medium, and to reach out. And that for me was a very fulfilling activity that I didn't expect to happen during this time. And other than that,
how did you get the word out?
Social media. Just did like a few videos and artwork and stuff to get people excited. And it was a huge success, and it actually worked very well. With technology nowadays, you can really share your screens, share the iPad markings, and so it was very interesting to teach orchestration. And I did a little bit of like side projects, like a piano reduction of a big piece, things like that, to just keep me engaged with my music. But I wasn't really able to create new stuff. Like, I'm barely now starting to write a new violin concerto, but creatively speaking, last few months were more geared towards other things, like connecting with people and being more engaged with the community online, which I found fascinating and very fulfilling.
I feel the same way. I feel that I felt like this need to reach outward because looking inward there was too much white noise. And writing about music every day, maybe watching performances about music or that was fine. In fact, I discovered so many incredible performances, not just of orchestra music, but chamber music groups I didn't really know about. And that was all of that. And doing this show once a week, this helped me. Again, it's this idea of one needing to connect to others more than maybe before, as opposed to looking inside, which I think composition and conducting are very similar in that regard. You have to find a quiet space and think of kernels of truth and expand upon them, or in my case, take them down to the kernels of truth. How about you, Viet?
Yeah, I feel really similarly. Right before the pandemic started here in the US, I was working on some large ensemble pieces that have now been postponed at least a year. So it kind of freed up time for me to not only continue working on those pieces, but also just to take a break and take a step back. Because I felt like for a while, I kind of wanted to take a little bit of a breather, because I've been kind of just writing for years. And it was nice just to have some time for myself where I wasn't stressed out about a deadline, which had been my life for a while. And now I'm getting back into writing. I finished this really short little oboe duet recently, and doing some chamber pieces that can be done with social distancing or with the same person. Before the end of the year, I'll be writing a short cello ensemble piece that will be performed by one cellist, a video or overlaid tracks. So looking forward to those. I'm also looking forward to finishing all of the larger ensemble pieces. I just keep thinking it's going to be whenever those get performed, it's going to feel like this triumph. I'll probably just be sitting there crying the whole time listening to them.
I've been, as I'm sure you have, noticing and perhaps watching these Europe reemerging, ahead of what we've been able to do so far. And I feel these two sort of disparate emotions. One of just incredible elation, thinking that it's actually possible somewhere that Mahler's Sixth Symphony can be performed live, as it was two weeks ago at the Salzburg Festival at the Vienna Philharmonic, with an audience, and also this incredible sense of frustration that who knows when that will happen again here safely, as it already is happening there. And so I'm of two minds of watching these things happen, and one in the end, I'm grateful that there is and optimistic that there is a future that is happening already, and we can use these performances as sort of guideposts for our future. So that's a wonderful thing. But I don't know have you guys been watching many live performances from other parts of the world?
Yes, and I did. I think as a composer, I guess we're lucky we can just ship out our music to orchestra. So I did get a chance to do a virtual recording in Slovakia, with the Bratislava Symphony. So we just online did an orchestral arrangement and was able to do a recording that way. So, and that was very surreal because I was in my living room at 2 a.m. because of the time difference, and just listening to them perform my music. It was very strange, but at the same time, as you say, kind of hopeful that it's happening somewhere, and that eventually hopefully we'll be able to experience that in person as well.
I'd like to just give our audience a little a chance to get to know you both a little better. Viet, first of all, how do we know each other? I think that we can start as well as we haven't had a chance to meet in person yet for logistical reasons, really, at first, but now because of this, we're still communicating as we are now. And what was it that brought us together? And then Juan Pablo, after, you can probably share the same thing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, for many years I had heard about this residency with the California Symphony, just from either the composers who had done it in the past, just reading about it and word of mouth. But it always seemed like this amazing opportunity because it's a 3-year long, basically, relationship with an orchestra, and I hadn't at the time written a ton of orchestra music yet. And I was I should apply for this thing because it'd be amazing. It'd be a dream come true. And so I applied, and was so grateful to have been chosen for it. And that's kind of how we connected, was through that.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about this process? Because I can talk about it from my end, of course, and every fellowship residency program has a slightly different process of what it means to apply. But in regards to your point of view, applying for the Young American Composer in Residency, what does that mean from the composer's point of view? What do you have to apply with?
Yeah, so from what I remember, it was, the application was all anonymous. So all of our materials didn't have our name or anything on them.
That's unique. That's unique, isn't it?
Yeah, for something like that, it is. Which I think it like parallels kind of like orchestral auditions, right? But yeah, so just submitted 3 pieces, and in that 3 recordings, and then scores to go along with those. And it was all online, I remember, which was nice, because I think a lot of applications these days are online, but like when I was in like college, everything was like you had to go to the store and print out your pieces and ship them, and
it's an expense.
Yeah, and you kind of had to like really plan ahead. Like, okay, I need to like finish editing the scores for this date, and then I need to like go print them out and bind them, and then that takes time, and then like get them in the mail, all that sort of stuff. But this was like
now it's like copy and paste into an email, right?
Yeah, I mean, other than like redacting my name off of stuff, it was really simple. And then after that, it's just really like the waiting game, because I'm sure like from your point of view, having to go through like 130 applications or something, it's a lot of music to listen to, because it's not 130 pieces, it's like 3 times that, because everyone has 3 pieces. So yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you from my end, when I became music director, we were still doing the old process where everyone had to send in their scores, and we literally had a wall of scores alongside the filing cabinet, like you said, hundreds and hundreds of pieces of music that we had to sift through and open up, and various packing stuff flying all over the office.
Yeah.
And so now it's much more efficient from both sides. How about you, Juan Pablo? How do we come in contact? This is very recent.
Yeah. So I had met Lacey, the executive director of the Las Vegas Philharmonic, a couple of years ago through the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra, very briefly. But then last year I was in Las Vegas for the Latin GRAMMYs. I was nominated with my album Marachitlan, and I had dinner with Lacey and just gave her a copy of the album for you, Donato. And a month later, I heard back from her saying that you guys had won the Amplifying Voices grant from New Music USA, with the opportunity of having a collaboration, working together, writing a new piece to be premiered next season by the Las Vegas Philharmonic, California Symphony, and other orchestras, Richmond, Louisiana. So it's kind of a dream come true for a composer, because it's not only like a premiere, but it's an opportunity to engage with each of these orchestras, multiple trips to each of the cities to collaborate with the orchestra, with the conductor. So I think, it's just the best kind of situation for a composer, where you can actually get feedback from musicians, actually feel like you're a part of the community, and not just showing up for a premiere date, which is typically what happens for composers. You show up for a dress rehearsal, take a bow in the premiere, and that's it. And this is kind of it creates a platform for composers to actually have a deeper connection with the orchestra, with the conductor, to even like suggest some programming for future seasons. So it's amazing to feel this support, and to be valued as a composer, as a creator of a work, but also as part of the mechanism of an orchestra with it, which I think is essential. So I'm very grateful and very excited to work with you soon.
I'm excited to work with both of you, and I think that there cannot be enough said and described about the relationship from the moment you actually. This might be difficult to describe, but it is such a unique it's like conducting an orchestra. You know, you're practicing to do something with something you cannot work with at home.
Yeah.
You are composing for this multi-voiced ensemble that you sure, we have modern technology, and you have MIDI tracks, and you can not really, but you can kind of approximate the sound of the orchestra on your computer, but it doesn't even come close to what it really sounds like. So you're writing for something at home that you don't really ever hear until hours before it's to be performed, 7 hours before, what have you. And this process must be, talk about it, this process of writing for this beast of a thing called an orchestra, and not really having this immediate, constant in touchness with that. I like.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. It's crazy. It's like showing up uninvited to a birthday party, and like 100 people are there, and you're you're part of the celebration, and you're like, whoa, like, is this happening? This really something I created? It's always very surreal, no matter how many times you get to do it, it's very different from what you expect. Of course, you learn along the way, what things can and can't work, but it's definitely very, very demanding that you need to write a piece that has legs, that stands on its own, and that can be, put together in a few rehearsals, that no questions asked, like the parts are pristine, so that all of the rehearsals can be spent on making music and not answering, technical questions. So that's one side of it. But it's definitely very surprising always, and very rewarding to hear your music as a composer. It's always like crazy, crazy exciting. But it's even better when, as you say, when you get the chance to actually not only write for the orchestra, but write for people to personally know, okay, I like to write a violin solo because this concertmaster is amazing. So when you start to putting names to the instruments, that's when it's a different experience for a composer, and the piece just gets way better because it's about a connection, and it's not just about writing notes on a page. So
no, it's like I agree. It's always like exciting no matter what. And even if you have, I feel like if you have the same piece that's played by multiple orchestras, it's going to be like a new experience because it's new people and it's new musicians, new conductor. And it just never gets boring. I'll say that. And I think like part of it also writing for orchestra is like always wanting it to sound the way you intended it, whether that's like to sound good or, at least to be what you envisioned for it. But also when you write for orchestra, you want it to feel like it's your own voice as well. And obviously when you write solo or chamber music, you can kind of develop the way you write for those groups at a quicker pace, because oftentimes writing those pieces can be faster, and also just like the delay between the finished like completion date and the premiere can be a lot like sooner. So I mean, it's pretty often that we write orchestral music and like it's not premiered for like a year or something. So it can just be like a slower process to like figure out your voice and how you personally speak with the orchestra. But it's always worth it. And like, I feel like when I write an orchestral piece, I learn the most after each one of those premieres compared to like a solo piece or something.
Really? How so?
I think just because there's like more that you're dealing with. So it's just like there's more to learn. As opposed to like when you write like a solo cello piece, you intimately get to know the cello, but then in an orchestra, you intimately get to know the cello, but not just the cello, but like several cellos, and then the string section, and then like on top of that, the winds and the percussion, and it's just it's a lot of like relationship building, and I think the most important thing in a relationship is trust. So like wanting to earn the trust of all the musicians is really important too.
Yeah.
Are either of you? Of course, you're at the beginning of your career, so you may be different 20 years from now, who knows? But at the moment, do either of you feel that you are tinkerers with your pieces? In other words, you write a piece for an orchestra, you hear it performed, you're like, okay, I'm going to go back and take this part out for the cellos, and I don't like this section anymore. Are you, or are you the type of composer? Okay, I wrote that piece, and it is what it is, and now I'm on to the next, and that's fine.
Yeah, I'm the second type. I think it would be like a never-ending process if you keep revising. And I think a composition is just like a photograph that someone takes at a specific point in life, and that's what it is. You can't go and Photoshop a picture when you were 6 years old. It makes no sense. One thing that I do a lot is that whenever an orchestra plays my piece, I collect the set of parts that I rent to them. And I go through every single part and see what each musician wrote in their part. So I want to see what they needed to add to the part, or what kind of advice, sometimes bowing, sometimes, I don't know, a different phrasing. So that's a huge learning experience for me. And I do it every time and go through every single part. And those kind of like technical suggestions, I do add to the score, so that by the time, the fifth orchestra plays a piece of mine, the bowing suggestions are really clear. Everything is so clear because 500 musicians have given me a composition lesson basically with their parts. By the time these orchestra play the music, everything is very clear. So just the technical things I do update, and I try to keep I try to keep that kind of humble perspective, and letting musicians also inform, because they're the best teachers. They know their instrument better than any composer. So that kind of feedback is always very welcome. But going back and rewriting pieces, for me, I don't know, has proved to be, I always say it's better to fix it in the next piece. Whatever didn't work, okay, let's keep working hard. And what's fun about composing is that each piece presents its own set of challenges, and you never stop learning. So I think that's why we do it, because we want to get it right eventually.
Yeah,
I'm kind of the opposite. I mean, there are some pieces of mine where I feel I'm really happy with it in its original, first version 1.0. But some of my pieces, I just keep fixing them. Maybe I feel like by the third time, I'm like, okay, it's good, it's fine now. But yeah, there's a couple pieces of mine where I've rewritten them 3 times, and I'm always happy that I did. But by the end, I'm pretty sick of those pieces. But especially pieces where I've made versions of it for different instrumentations. With each new instrumentation, I kind of discover something new about the piece that I can't help but put into one of the other versions, even if I have already written one of those other versions. So I do that, and even with chamber music too. I think sometimes it's just because when the deadline for the piece is there, I feel like there's always a list of things in my head where I'm like, if I had another 24 hours, I could do this. And no matter what, even if I had that 24 hours, I would come up with something else. And when a piece is when I'm forced to turn it in, I feel like someone's prying it out of my hands. So when it's performed and I, have that experience, I'm always yeah, well, let's get back to that thing that I had if I had 24 hours left, I would do. But then some other pieces, I'm always I'm just happy with how it turned out from the from the get-go, and don't feel the need to revise. It really depends on the piece for me.
Yeah, sure. Well, let's give our audience a chance to hear some of your music. Juan Pablo, you mentioned you were in Las Vegas for the Latin Grammys, and you mentioned this wonderful piece that's on the CD, and was also was on the CD that was nominated for the Grammy Latin Grammys. And it's a piece called Mariachi Plan, and it's played by your hometown orchestra, the Jalisco Philharmonic, which is a wonderful, one of the great orchestras in Latin America. I've had the honor of conducting them a couple of times. Can you talk a little bit about how this project started and how the CD came about and the piece?
Yeah, so this piece was actually written for a national composition competition that the Jalisco Philharmonic organized in 2016. So I wrote the piece for them for that competition. I won that competition, and part of the prize was getting the piece rehearsed and premiered with them. And it went really well. After that week of work, we decided we wanted to do a CD together, basically recording my orchestral repertoire up to that point. And the piece itself, it's one of those lucky things I can't really explain. I mean, I wrote it as to pay homage to Jalisco, which is the state where I was born, where mariachi music originated. So I wanted to write a piece that kind of explained the experience of what it's like to actually attend a mariachi plaza in Mexico, and walking around and hearing different ensembles competing against each other and kind of having their music clashing against each other. So I wanted to give like a very authentic kind of experience of what that's like. And I was fortunate enough that within a year or so, 20 orchestras had picked up that piece and played it. Eventually the CD came out, and Mariachi Plan was nominated for a Latin Grammy. And yeah, it's one of those lucky pieces. It was just written with a lot of love for Mexico. That's the only thing I can say. Like I grew up obviously hearing all of this mariachi music. I grew up playing violin, so I knew some mariachi licks as well. And it was just one of those pieces where I think as composer we sometimes get lucky in being able to kind of convey that vibe and that positive energy and all of those colors, Mexican in my case. And it's one of my favorite pieces in my catalog, and I'm so happy that so many orchestras want to play it and have played it. And this, to me, the video they're going to share, is one of my favorite presentations, concerts. It happened actually in Los Angeles at the USC Bovard Auditorium. So basically, the Jalisco Philharmonic did a tour in the US, and part of that tour included Mariachi Plan.
Let's listen to it and watch it.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Maggie. I always, what a great piece. And I always hate stopping something in the middle. It's going on to the next contrasting section because I love being there too. Mm-hmm. I've always been so appreciative of composers who knows, for whatever reason, they decide to incorporate what they've experienced either as in their life as a performer or their heritage, and they bring that story to their music, and they may not even know how immediate it is, or how it gets right to the matter. Mm-hmm. So bravo for that. It's an exciting piece, but I know the piece, and I love the piece, and by the way, I love that orchestra too. And Marco Risotto is one of the unsung great conductors in my opinion.
Yeah. He's amazing. Absolutely.
We have, okay, you mentioned you're finishing a piece for 2 oboes. Mm-hmm. And this is a piece I didn't know until you sent it the other day. And I love the title, which is, it's extraordinarily, and ordinarily is in parentheses, fancy. And it's performed by the Kaleidoscope Chamber Orchestra, and it's a concerto for two oboes and chamber orchestra. How did this come about? And tell us a little bit about. There's things that I think you would say most oboists try to avoid when they're playing, and you purposely you focus on it. It's this sort of tongue-in-cheek, this humor. Tell us about this piece.
Yeah, so this was like a piece that. I had worked with the Kaleidoscope Chamber Orchestra before once, and that was a really good experience. And they asked if I wanted to write another piece, and they basically asked, like, within reason, like, what is your like kind of dream piece to write? And I was like, okay, let me think about it. And then I was like, I want to do the double oboe concerto because it was like kind of a Baroque genre. Like Baroque composers, especially Italian ones, like really loved oboes, and the double oboe concerto was a thing that several composers wrote. And I love multiphonics on the oboe. It's basically where you play an incorrect fingering and the note sounds like kind of like if you attached an oboe to like a guitar like distortion pedal. And I kind of think of multiphonics as like an extra fancy technique. It's like something that sounds otherworldly on the oboe, so kind of extra fancy. And then so my concept for the piece was one of the oboes would be ordinarily fancy and one would want us to sound like traditionally beautiful. And then the other oboe is just extra fancy, so hence the title Extraordinarily Fancy. And it's kind of a conversation between the two as well with the orchestra, where one of the oboes is just like, okay, let's play this Vivaldi-esque thing. And then the other oboe is like, well, we can do that, but I want to use multiphonics in it. And they kind of like bicker back and forth. And then the orchestra kind of eventually joins the side of the second oboist who loves multiphonics and does things like won't let the first oboist cadence and finish this phrase. And eventually they kind of sort it out, and the first oboist actually does play some multiphonics, like, hey, it's not so bad. So I love using things like extended techniques and
All right, well, let's take a listen to Extraordinarily Fancy. know it's hilarious. It's really, and it also brings up not to sound too extraordinarily fancy myself, but the act of writing a double concerto is, it by its very essence, you can't help but have a modern take on it, because and you're writing in a Baroque form, so the piece inside itself has that dichotomy, and you as a composer have that dichotomy.
Yeah, and the way when I first started the piece, I was like, I want the first 2 minutes to be as if Viet Cuong was a Baroque composer. So I actually studied a lot of Vivaldi, and I don't think it ended up sounding like Vivaldi because it's more chromatic than he tended to be. But basically, the piece becomes a theme and variations on the first 2 minutes, and different things get kind of put through a meat grinder and reconstituted in different ways. But it was really fun to write for that reason, because I got to use all the music theory that I was kind of forced to learn in college. So that was a plus too.
I have to say that I attended that premiere and really enjoyed it. As an audience, it's really awesome when you can tell that the composer has a sense of humor. Sometimes people think that classical music is extremely serious, and that we as composers are just crying ourselves and writing music, and it's really nice to see such a contemporary piece that has sense of humor and that has a theatrical component to it. It really reeled me in as an audience member. So yeah, really nice. Really
thank you. Yeah, I think there's a time and place for different moods in your life. Yeah. I've written serious music too, but and this trying to there's nothing worse than a joke falling flat, just when you say a joke. And when it's a musical joke, it's an extra layer of I hope people get it. So most people seem to laugh when I wanted them to. So
did you have
or an unintentional joke? You're oh wait, that wasn't supposed to be.
Yeah. Right? Yeah.
I was gonna ask if you had any indications for the performers, because they seem to be acting out their parts as well. Was that notated in the score, or was that something that came about in the rehearsal process with them, and their own personalities injected in the piece? Or
yeah. No, some of it was written in the score, when I wanted them to sound frustrated or something, I put stern, and then the other was for like mezzo forte mockingly or something. The last section we just listened to, I wanted to feel like a lesson, where there's a metronome going, and one of the oboes is the teacher, and the other one's the student who doesn't want to play what the teacher wants them to play. And so I would put that in, but they're actually the Robert Walker and Laura Argenbright, the two amazing oboes that you heard, they are friends. And it was funny, there's one part in the piece where Laura plays a half step off from Robert, to make fun of him. Mm-hmm. And she's oh, I actually do that all the time, when we play together. So it's just a lot of it worked so well because they're friends and had played in orchestras together, especially in Kaleidoscope. And it was there wasn't any ice to break to get them to do, to really portray the characters.
That's cool. Juan Pablo, I noticed on the next piece we're playing, the El Laberinto de la Soledad, you're the conductor.
Yeah.
All right. Now, tell us a little bit about your experience with conducting, and especially conducting a piece of your own.
So I was always very shy about conducting. I was always very serious about composing and knew that was my path. But when I did my doctorate at USC, one of my main focuses was conducting, so choral and orchestral conducting. And I just felt it was a necessity. I was in so many situations where sometimes even orchestra conductors telling me would you like to conduct your piece? I'd be happy if you do it in the concert. And I was there for rehearsals, and I was no, super intimidated. So it was just a great opportunity to have the opportunity of actually embodying my music. It's something that we don't get to do too often as composers, is be on the stage simply. And that's a whole different experience of how you feel, the music kind of connecting with your body and how you can communicate that to the players. It's just an extra layer of happiness that I've been happy to add to my career as well. And this video we're watching is again with the Jalisco Philharmonic, and we did a concert in February featuring basically mostly my music. So I was able to conduct a lot of my own pieces, and it was just something I really enjoyed, and it something that I'm looking forward to adding more and more in my music making. I think it's just a different experience. Sometimes when I work with great conductors, it's also such a joy just to learn about their take on my own music. Like I learned so much about my own compositions by seeing other people put their spin on it. But I guess sometimes it's also nice to come in with an orchestra and communicate exactly what you imagined and make that happen. And so this is an example. This is a piece that I wrote back in 2012. That was my thesis piece for my master's degree at the Manhattan School of Music. And the year after that, it won the BMI William Schumann Prize, which really took my career off, especially in the orchestral world, which is very difficult to kind of be included in as a composer. So I'm very grateful. This was kind of like my first big orchestra piece that had some success. And again, Mexico is ingrained in it, and it's about the struggle, or about finding your own identity as a Mexican person, and kind of allowing both the Spanish heritage and the indigenous heritage to coexist, and how that can happen. And I think classical music is a fantastic medium, because most of the instruments that belong to the orchestra have that European side, but at the same time, a lot of Mexican traditional music uses those instruments. I mean, mariachi, a lot of the folk music, son jarocho, has those instruments. So it's a nice thing that I enjoy combining, and I'm always finding new ways to do so. So this is an example of that.
Great, let's listen to it. Thanks, man. Bravo, Juan Pablo. You know, you what I love is that you carry on this tradition of these unique harmonies, use of the percussion instruments that are sort of native to to Mexico, and the rhythms, of course. What is so, in a way, you know, so lucky in that there's such a rich tradition of not only folkloric music and dance, but classical music, Western classical music, has been in Mexico since the 15th century. The very first opera written in the Americas was in Mexico City.
Yeah.
In 1903 by a Mexican-born musician. So this could be a whole other how a modern Mexico chooses to separate itself, but it also embrace it. What you were talking about earlier is that, you know, it's a complicated relationship Mexico has to Spain, to Europe, and it's, while it is Western classical music has a wonderful tradition, there is also this friction. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, just to give like an interesting fact, my first composition teacher in Mexico studied composition with a priest. So the Catholic Church has been very involved in music making. So there's also that, you know, interesting like, you know, dichotomy and like how to deal with that, how to deal with the fact that there's so much, you know, religious music in Mexico that's been part of the tradition, and so yeah, representing Spain and the Spanish conquest. And I think part of my mission as a composer has been through my music to explore that relationship, and that, you know, try to answer sometimes with music like what I think is Mexico, and that's been very interesting to me. And I think every piece that I write, I try to have a different take on that same question, like what is Mexico and what is classical Mexican music? Like that's something I've been trying to answer, and I love that opportunity, especially with the orchestra. I think you can really address that concept of identity, and also to not only ask the tough questions, but also, as you've seen, I love also like celebrating the rich traditions of Mexico, and to allow people to also appreciate that side of Mexico that is, in my opinion, really beautiful, and that sometimes doesn't get as much media attention maybe. And so there's a little bit of both in my music present.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about how we have a shared history. We both played in band growing up, and orchestra in my case as well. My first musical experiences, ensemble experiences, was not in orchestra. It actually was playing horn in band. And you have a similar background. And the piece that we're going to hear has two avenues of performance, does it not? And
three, actually.
Oh, really? Three? Oh, good. We'll hear about this. Talk a little bit about this, how these experiences, initial experiences, inform your music making today, inform the way you compose, and perhaps your point of view.
Yeah. Well, I played percussion in band, not just like concert band, but also marching band, and I also played clarinet as well. And I remember like growing up, I kind of, before I found music, I felt kind of like adrift in a way. Like I was never like into sports like a lot of the other kids, and it was like hard for me to find like what my niche was. But then when I joined band, it was like just like as if, you know, I had found this thing that I had been looking for my whole life. And like just in terms of like my social life, like I had friends and everything, and it was just such a positive thing for me. And so because of that, I still write for wind ensemble. It feels like when I write for wind ensemble or band, I like feel like I'm kind of coming home in a way. So oftentimes when I have pieces that are either chamber pieces or orchestral pieces, I kind of will use material from them and turn them into band pieces, or I'll just like make an like adaptation for a band. And this piece that we're going to look at next, it has versions for both chamber orchestra and orchestra, but also a wind ensemble version. So, and it's like this is one of the pieces that I revised, like by virtue of making different versions, it was like each one felt like a new revision. And when I wrote the chamber orchestra version first, and then the full orchestra version. And then after that, I was working on the wind ensemble version, which I thought would be like the last one. But then I came up with this idea with piccolos that I just like had to use. So I went back and redid the orchestra version to include the piccolo stuff. I think I'm happy with it all now, but I don't know if I'm just like totally happy with it, or if it's just like I just can't work on this piece anymore. But I was really happy with like the last performance of the orchestra version. So,
and that's the one we're going to hear.
Yes, with Curtis Symphony. Right,
and the addition of piccolos is what we will hear in this version.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and is it? Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that at the beginning in conjunction with the sound of I'm doing
the wine glasses?
Yeah.
It's
a great combination of sound. I think it's a great addition.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was like in the first movement. It's a percussion quartet concerto, and you'll see the percussion quartet toasting wine glasses that are amplified, and in the orchestral palette, I was trying to figure out what could sound like an orchestra like within a wine glass. So there are these high glassy got it, string harmonics, and there's this really high tinkly piano and percussion writing, the orchestral percussion playing xylophone and marimba vibraphone, because kind of when you toast wine glass, there's like that like clicking sort of sound of glass kind of making impact. Mm-hmm. And then the piccolos kind of exist within that high register as well, and they have kind of a more brittle sound than a flute normally does. So kind of all together, it's like a crystal glass like orchestral sound to me.
It's so effective. Let's take a listen. This is called Renewal.
Yes.
Such a great group.
Awesome. Amazing.
But and we were mentioning this before we started the show, that you came up with all of the ideas for the camera angles.
Yeah, I looked into like GoPro 360s, which are like, they're like tiny little cameras that you can put on like your head, your car, you can hang them. And so they give you basically a full 360 like image of everything. There's a really cool video of like a GoPro video of like snowboarders, where you can basically move the camera to wherever you want on YouTube. And so basically, like, I just had this footage, and like I had an angle of the ceiling, of the snare drum, of all of them, and you can kind of set coordinates for like, at this point, like start here, and then like over time, over 30 seconds, rotate to this coordinate.
Amazing.
It's really fun.
What is interesting, of course, is if you were to just listen to the piece, which is fun in and of itself, of course, you miss another really important aspect of it, which is these rhythms that are created are being shared and created by the four percussionists. So it's not just one person playing the snare drum.
Yeah.
Which you might get that impression if you were just listening to it. It's actually all four of them creating that composite rhythm together.
Yeah.
And also when you are hearing are they tuned?
Yeah.
They're so when you're hearing the tuned wine glasses and champagne glasses, you may just think it's just two folks, but they're actually they have a pattern that they're doing as well, which is must be so incredibly, first of all, amazing to learn. And Percussion Quartet, but also to watch them do it. It's beautiful.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, and like all of this, like what you're saying about them kind of working as one, I always wanted them to feel like as if they are one soloist, even though they're a quartet. I didn't want to write a concerto where like each of them had like their station on stage. Like there are stations in the piece, but they move together. And the reason for that was because the piece, like renewal, it's about renewable energy. So the first movement's water, second movement's hydro, last movement's solar. But I think of something like renewable energy as like this amazing feat of, humans like working together. And the idea of the quartet working together in such a synergistic way is that kind of symbolizes like all the people who are working together to try to make the earth like a better place. So it applies not just to renewable energy, but really a lot of things that where you think like, wow, like the cooperation that was involved in creating this thing, and like kind of music in general is like that, especially orchestral music. So many people who are part of this one goal and vision for something.
Amazing.
We didn't see the end, but the end is what I appreciated. Would require the conductor to really to buckle down and learn, is that it's, again, if you were to just hear it, you would hear this continual groove, but the bass player in the orchestra has this sort of jagged walking bass sort of thing happening at the end. And it's actually, I noticed, without looking at the score in front of me, it's very complicated mixed meter. And so Sarah, who's a good friend of mine, I was so appreciative of her, because at the end, she's just like, and yet if you were to just hear it, you wouldn't necessarily know that was happening.
Yeah, it's like where the bass line kind of, I wanted it to sound like it was like kind of put on like slow-mo for a second. So like eighth notes turn to quarter note triplets. And to notate it means like certain note measures are like 5/8, but then there's like the rest, last three eighth notes of that bar turn into like a 2/4 with 3 quarter note triplets. So it's like complicated, and to get like 4 percussionists to play that so it feels like it's just like a natural like weird groove is tricky. And I mean, the percussionists here at Sandbox Percussion are amazing, and the bass section was also really amazing, where they actually like stayed after one rehearsal to try to get it right without anyone asking them to. So yeah, cooperation, so much can happen.
Juan Pablo, you mentioned is this piece that we're about to watch, is this was part of the LA Chamber Orchestra project that you were a part of?
This was before I was invited to be like their sound investment composer last season. So this was about 2 years ago, and it's part of what the LA Chamber Orchestra is doing, excuse me, called the session concerts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's presenting music in interesting and new venues. So this is in an art gallery in downtown LA, and they played my harp concerto, but without conductor. So it was kind of interesting. This first time it was done without a conductor, and it kind of builds upon the same concept that I'm talking about. And in this specific case, it's called Ángel Mestizo. Sorry, I'm gonna get some water here.
Well, I noticed that Cristina Montes Mateo. She tell us a little bit about the soloist.
She's Spanish. Yeah, she's from Spain, and she plays a lot with the LA Phil. So it was interesting. The piece itself is about the migration of the harp as an instrument from Spain to Mexico during the Spanish conquest, and how the instrument kind of evolved into a Mexican instrument, because nowadays it's one of the most popular folk instruments in Mexico is the harp, obviously without pedals. But I wanted to explore that idea about migration and using the harp as a metaphor for what migration does and how the mixture of two cultures creates something new, and to explore at the same time another kind of amicable collision of two cultures, Spanish and indigenous, and how that also created very interesting genres of music in Mexico. So what we're going to hear is the end of the cadenza, where the harp actually turns from a European into a Mexican instrument and leads into a son jarocho, which is a very traditional folk dance in Veracruz, collides with or near the Gulf of Mexico, where the harp first came into Mexico. So it's kind of, we'll get to listen to the evolution of the instrument from being European turning into a Mexican instrument.
I don't know if you've, I just have to share with you, and I'm sure perhaps you've had this similar experience in the main plaza of Veracruz. Almost nightly they have son, especially yes. I think Thursday nights are the big son night in the plaza. And this is, while it's still performed and danced to, in general, it's older couples that dance the son. That evening that I went. And the sound of the harp outdoors in that beautiful plaza right by the ocean is one of the most magical experiences anyone can ever have. It is so incredibly powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah, Veracruz harp is always very magical and very interesting to kind of figure out how they do it, because the playing techniques are very different from the classical harp. So part of the work that went into writing this piece was to try to figure out how I could make a classical harp sound as a Mexican one. And so you'll get to hear a little bit of that as well.
Great. So this is Ángel Mestizo. Cool piece, Juan Pablo.
Thank you.
I'm always amazed at a piece that's obviously rhythmically tricky. That not that the conductor's be all end all, but it's with pieces like this, it does help to have someone who is acting through it. But was it a challenge? Of course, these are some of the greatest musicians in California, but still, it's I would imagine it was tricky for them to
yeah, it was tricky. It was also tricky to run the rehearsals. I found that interesting. Like, when you have so many great leaders in a group, it was tricky to kind of put things together. But eventually, they kind of divided up tasks, the cueing, the kind of the body motion, and that was really interesting to see this come together. It was the first time it was conducted. Conductor-less. So that was very, very interesting, and I think a great performance. And also the harpist, the solo part, just really amazes me how well it's performed.
And I'm curious as to whether Christina was able to bring to the table some of the history of how the harp came from Spain to Mexico, and be able to add what you wanted in terms of creating those specific colors of the Mexican harp to the classical harp.
We definitely collaborated a lot in getting the right, whatever that means, sound. But interestingly enough, there's not a lot of information as to how the harp migrated to Mexico. I did a lot of research, didn't find a lot of information, which was also kind of freeing as a composer to try to make my own story and kind of divide each movement into how I imagine things happen. And one thing I did use a lot is, I think language is something that really carries a lot of history, a lot of personality. You can tell a lot about a country by how they speak. So one thing I did, for instance, the melodies you hear in the last movement, the Son Jarocho that we just heard, what I did, and this is something I do often, here's a free trick for composers, is I take a text. In this case, it was a poem by a poet from Veracruz, and I set that text to music, and then I got rid of the text, but that's how I got the melody. So basically, this is a song without words, as you may, from a text, from a poem from Veracruz. So basically, I was able to ingrain how Veracruz speaks in a way and get that DNA into the melody. So a lot of that information came from poetry and different types of inspirations from Veracruz itself. So there's a lot of that involved in the writing process as well.
I just have to quickly mention that's a wonderful technique to inspire you to for a composer to use in order to create a melody, perhaps.
Yeah,
I have to mention that. Go ahead, Juan Pablo.
Oh yeah, I think sometimes as composers, when we're writing a melody, we're thinking like note by note, and it's too easy to kind of fall into the same tricks of what your ear is telling you to do. Mm-hmm. But when you have a text and there's actually syllables that you have set to notes, sometimes what happens is you think the melody is complete, but then you have an extra 1 or 2 syllables, and it takes you to a place that's so unexpected. And I think I found that to be such an inspiration. And you also feel like there's a specific feeling, emotion, story that you're addressing, and that always helps me a lot whenever I'm writing a melody, to feel like someone is singing it and someone is trying to express something. So yeah, that's the case of this last movement, Son Jarocho.
I should try that.
Yeah,
it's a good idea, isn't it?
Yeah. All your music just sounds so musical, for lack of a better word. And like, you just make all the ensemble sound so good, but also it all sounds so like personal.
Thank you.
And I loved everything of yours that I've heard today.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I also grew up as a singer, so I was trained in the like opera tradition as a tenor. So singing is a huge part of the process of my composition process. It's a lot of singing and banging notes on a piano. So I mean, I think that translates to my instrumental writing as well, like with the big vocal lines. And
yeah,
there is something that was missing. I wanted to mention that you and this is you can't really see the incredible beauty and uniqueness of the theater in which the Orchestra of Jalisco plays in. This is one of the most incredible opera houses in North America. And unfortunately, the shell that's put up on this beautifully ornate opera house doesn't give it justice. But can you talk a little bit about walking? I will never forget walking into that opera house for the first time from the stage and looking out and imagining what amazing performances must have happened on this stage over the years.
Well, I think Plácido Domingo had his debut there, and I grew up going to this theater as an audience member because my mother is a concert pianist. So I actually grew up in this theater attending rehearsals. I was 7 years old, maybe. So I got to, this theater is of special significance to me because that's basically where I grew up, just like wandering the halls. And yeah, it's super beautiful. The acoustics are incredible. Like you could sit anywhere and you could hear the flutes like murmuring in your ear. So it's always wonderful when I get to go back and make music there. There's so much personal history as well.
I have to just give a shout out. One of the percussionists from an orchestra that I conduct almost every year in Chile, in Concepcion, Chile, is watching, and he's sending his regards from the winter of the southern half of Chile, and he's loving both of your music, and he's a wonderful percussionist in this, and the orchestra is great. So I hope you get to meet him someday. We're going to end yet. I was happy that you sent a piece that wasn't your own, that was probably in connection a little bit with perhaps a double oboe concerto, perhaps not. I'm not quite sure. It's a Bach. It's a wonderful performance. It's also a performance I'd never seen before of one of the Bach harpsichord concertos or keyboard concertos. Why did you send this video?
I just love the performance. I mean, when I was writing my double oboe concerto, I was just listening to a ton of Baroque music, as you might imagine. And I just came across this performance with Jean Rondeau playing the harpsichord, and that was my first time seeing him play, and he's just like quickly become one of my favorite performers today. He has a bunch of videos of himself playing like solo pieces. I'm a big Domenico Scarlatti fan, and he has an amazing recording of this A minor harpsichord concerto that I've loved for many years. And it's just like a performance where everything is speaking to everything else, and I just love it. And the piece is like one of my favorite pieces, not just by Bach, but like just one of my favorite pieces, period.
Mine as well.
One of those pieces where like when I listen to it, I'm like, man, why do I try?
I think one of the most magical things that happens in the world is great harpsichord playing, because there are no dynamics, except for if you have a double manual, you can have the one manual softer than the other or slightly different sound than the other. But there's no way to control the type of sound that you want. As opposed to a piano, you can make it hard, you can make it soft, you can make it loud, you can make it soft, and all the gradients in between. But a harpsichord is a plucked string, period. And yet a great harpsichordist like Jean Rondeau can create the most amazing things out of timing, out of how you play one note in front of the other, or vice versa. And this, I'm so glad you shared this, because we get to witness one of the most magical things that happens in life, which is great harpsichord playing.
Yes. And I just also love the sound of the harpsichord.
Oh, yeah.
Like one of my dream pieces is to write like a harpsichord concerto. But yeah, it's like when you watch this performance, it seems as if it's not a harpsichord. Like it's so musical, and there's so much happening where you would I wouldn't believe if someone told me, if I had no idea how a harpsichord worked, I wouldn't believe that there was no dynamics like at a harpsichord. So, but yeah.
Here it is. connecting. I'm sorry, I just had to wait. I had to wait for the cadence. Isn't it phenomenal that what he does? It's just, of course, we have Bach, but you know what we were talking about is that a great harpsichordist can create this illusion of legato, of cantabile, of singing that I just don't. It just blows my mind.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's like the way that this performance is like creates so much tension release. Like when it goes like da, 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 like it's just like I feel like I'm walking on like a tightrope or something. For a harpsichordist to make me feel that way, it's like pretty special, I think.
I want to thank both of you so much. We went way over. Usually there's only an hour long, but I wanted to make sure and play all of your music, all of the things you wanted to share, and for everyone to get to know you both better. We have incredible plans with both the Las Vegas Philharmonic and the California Symphony for both of you, and I can say that there's no greater experience that I have than when I am working with a composer on a new piece of music. It's something that what our art form is. It's a living art form. It's, yes, we get the honor of doing what we just did, which is listening to a master composer, master musicians from music that's almost 250 years old to, of course, working with the music of today. But creating something new is just such a special and unique and thrilling thing for not, of course, you, the composer, but for all the people involved. So I look forward to our collaboration, and just thank you again for sharing your love, sharing what you do today.
Right back at you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Yeah, this is amazing. Thank you.
All right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.